space, the thing we have to cross. These are the voyages of the U.S.S. Horizon. Its ongoing mission, to seek out new life, to swear it was on stun the whole time, and to boldly claim we can fix it.
Hello, terrible listeners. Welcome to a special episode of Terrible Warriors. We're not actually going to play a game in the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes here. We are sitting down to, the title says Star Trek Adventures, Aaron Pollyea, so you already know that part. We are sitting down with one of the writers behind Star Trek Adventures, but I am not alone here at my table. Gathered around me is only member of the Horizon who wants to wake up early on a Saturday morning. He's the most diligent member of the crew, working the night shift.
Working every shift. This is Velvet Duke. I'm with the Dandies. We do Holodeck Follies and other fandom improvised shows. In this, I am the science officer.
You're Lasso Bow.
I am. I cross all those T's.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cross all those T's, and everything has. You have a strong paw.
Yes.
So what was fun is when we interviewed Jim Johnson, I had Joshua, who's our Commander Haddock, sitting with us, and now interviewing Aaron. But Aaron Pollyea, who is you can kind of hear him in the background there, laughing to Velvet jokes. Aaron, you are on the writing team for Star Trek Adventures. You wrote Tug of War that we just finished playing. I hate you.
Did.
And also, you've written the very next campaign that we're doing. Today we're about to sit down to record Signals, but the one right after it is also penned by you. So let's just start with who you are. I know you've got a lot more background in tabletop and in gaming that goes back decades. And so say hello.
Well, hi. Like you said, I'm Aaron Pollyea. I've been a freelance writer for a few game companies. Not many, but for probably around a decade now. Mainly science fiction. Actually, all science fiction, let's be honest. Battletech, Star Trek, things like that. Before that, I've probably been a gamer since I was around 10 years old. I remember playing tabletop gaming and RPGs back into middle school and before. I remember the old fastest Star Trek role-playing game. If you're that old, if that doesn't date me, I don't know what does. But yeah,
I mentioned this in the past. That was actually the reason we never played Star Trek before on the show, is that was the only option available other than homebrewing. And I was very close to homebrewing Star Trek based on other game mechanics out there. One in particular called Machine Zeit, but that's more of a Dead Space survival horror kind of thing. And so I thought of doing more of like a horror themed Star Trek episode, which have certainly been done. And then right when I was ready to be like, we're doing Star Trek someday, then Modiphius announced Star Trek Adventures, and I was like, yes, we have this.
Yeah. I was excited when I heard that announcement. I of course put together. Mm-hmm. I put together a quick breakdown of what I've written before and sent it off to Modiphius and said, hey, this is my dream. I've been wanting to write Star Trek forever. And like you, I had actually started homebrewing something, but not for an RPG, but kind of along the same lines of Starfleet battles, except not a dictionary, an unabridged dictionary of rules, more like, hey, here's 20 pages of rules, here's how to play, go.
Nice.
That's
actually similar to Jim Johnson's history as well. We were talking with him. He'd been homebrewing Star Trek for years as well. I feel like this is a universal theme among tabletop Trekkies that we've been having to scrounge, like in the wastelands, to try and put together these games until now it's all sort of come together.
Yeah, and it's both for RPG and like a tactical type game. It's difficult to find something that fits well with the universe, and that's why as a fan you end up trying to homebrew it. There are options out there, but they're far and few between, and sometimes they just won't fit your idea of what Star Trek should be. It might be too rules heavy or too rules light. But I think Modiphius here has kind of strung the needle, threaded the needle.
Yeah, it is a balancing act. When I was just looking at different, like, what rule set could we bootstrap Star Trek to, it can be quite difficult because Star Trek is not just social encounters like a Powered by Apocalypse game. It's also not just combat simulation like in something more like Dungeons and Dragons. It straddles both of that. You have both of that diplomatic character introspection with fire roll phasers. So you need to be able to simulate both of those game styles with just as much heft to it. And being Trekkies, we also want to get into the nitty-gritty and chomp down on the technobabble and how things work if we can.
And chew the seed.
So you can't just do something like Edge of the Empire's Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. It works for Star Wars, but it's also not science-y enough for the technology side.
Yeah, it's not
so
crunchy.
much more Star Trek. Exactly. Like, I don't need to know how hyperspace works, but I do need to know how the antimatter mix ratio is in engineering. So
1-to-1. There is no other ratio.
Well, not if you want to survive.
Or unless you got some like parallel world overlapping things going on, where it's like we should have blown up, but this ratio is off. That's not possible.
That's weird. Yeah,
that's weird. So let's go down to Tug of War. You wouldn't know this, but we had a time with this game, and now a part of it was on my side. We had been playing through several games where I'd gone very kind of loosey-goosey with the rules, and then all of a sudden I found myself in a situation where I needed to be able to really follow through with the combat roles appropriately, or else I'd be cheating out my players of a scene while they're trying to survive against these repulsor beams. And I failed real bad. We went through an hour of recording before I looked at players going like, can we just rewind this entire hour and do that again, because it sucked. And we broke for a week, and I went over the rules, and we came back and tried it again. It was a challenge for me for the first time having to flip through and learn how ship combat works, especially without the shields up. But even when it was done, though, when I figured out the rules, it was really satisfying. Getting we didn't think outside the box, but we just did our jobs, got everything working. We had everyone up on the bridge, working with the deflector beam, down in engineering, then powering the engines back up to the bridge as they punched their way out of the trap. And everyone kind of had a role one after another where they all needed to be the strong link in the chain.
But that was satisfying. That was, by doing that rewind, we ended up putting the tension in the right place.
Yeah.
Which was, I need to get my work done so that you can get yours done. And because everybody had their piece, it wasn't everyone sitting around waiting for somebody else to be the hero.
Yeah.
We were all the hero together.
Yeah.
Because the mechanics were already taken care of.
And I loved the balance between Act 1 and 2, where you get the first bit where you're just exploring the planet and being Starfleet officers and learning the history.
Geeking out.
And you're all geeking out. Even the ones at our table who aren't Star Trek fans or have a background, we're like, oh, I love this. We're into it. And then we're breaking orbit because I've given them, like another mission to go to, and that we spent a whole hour just like trying not to die.
That was kind of my intent, at least with what I wanted to do with the first part of the episode. I wanted to have the players have kind of an experience that they would have had maybe in an original series episode, where you're beaming down to a planet, but World War III has happened and there's just ruins everywhere. What do we learn from this? And the story behind these two species, one that was a xenophile and one that was a xenophobe, but the xenophile didn't understand that other culture and tried to uplift them, and how it bit them in the butt in the end.
There was that moment where, I'm sure it's different for everyone who's played through Tug of War, but there's that moment where the light switches and you go, oh, it's a Prime Directive moral story. And and it's all about finding, as I put it for my players, finding the corner piece in the puzzle. And so they're all working. Some are down on the planet, some are investigating the space station ruins, and others are looking through their sensor logs. And they're all taking all the information they're getting and putting them together in the lab. And then it was, they find the corner piece. All their technology is the same on both planets, except one is more concentrated than the other. They inherited it from the first planet, and they start figuring out. And it's a balancing act for the GM, and I'm sure it must have been challenging to write it, to not give the answers, but to at least hold enough crumbs on the floor that they know there are answers to be found, and then hand it out to them as they search in those corners.
Yeah, I think that it's a little easier than you think as a writer because, well, at least in this case, in your example, because I can give the whole story, and I think I fairly well do. In the actual adventure, I give the story to the GM. This is kind of what happened. But when you break it down into the acts of, here's how the players can find these things, that's where you have to be a little more picky and a little more intricate about how you play that out. You as the writer already have the story. You can share it. But making sure that it's not just handed out on a plate to the players that's where it takes a little more effort.
Stretching it out over that course of the hour, and then when they finally got that final piece, there was this moment. I think went around. This isn't just an asteroid bombardment. It wasn't natural. It was a mutually assured destruction. And at least when I originally wrote it, it was supposed to be more of the xenophobe species attacked first. I think that probably still came through that they attacked first, but the other species, Once it started, there was no turning toast back to bread at that point.
Exactly. At that point, it was, if there were survivors of the Rololo Shal, that they would attack back anyway, and if not, it would be automated defenses at that point. Kind of a dead man switch.
It was kind of a neat thing. I think Mass Effect has touched on using giant moons to crash into planets as well as weapons of mass destruction, and rather than just going for the trope of nuclear weapons and using we cleared out the asteroid belt and threw it into each other's planets. As we're going around the sun, we're just grabbing them. And
as they said, Mass Effect, Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space.
So it was, it was kind of this neat because it's not something that anyone was expecting. They were there's no radiation fallout, but the planet's still going through a nuclear winter. Because this wasn't a nuclear war, but it was still an extinction level event, and so. It was,
in many ways worse than a nuclear war.
In many ways, because the planet is now, as you mentioned, completely sterile or soon to be. And
it's definitely dying out. I said both the planets were, the oceans are starting to freeze over because of the post-impact winter.
The ecosystem has been shattered. Anything that's alive will eventually just make its way out stage left in about a generation. So
when we first beamed down, because we were talking about the climate in that way, I think the sense for all of us, and definitely for me, was that this is a rescue mission. There's still people that we can save, but you kept having to reiterate this is something that happened millennia ago.
This was hundreds of thousands of years. You come across. So I had one of your subordinates enter into a cave and finding it looks like they did survive for maybe a generation in caves.
Right.
But that was still before humans were in the Bronze Age. So
and the only reason anything survived at all is, I don't know if I mentioned it in the actual adventure, that maybe it has been 100,000 years or something like that, and there won't really be buildings left. The only things that are going to be left are these either buildings that have been buried under ice and preserved that way, or deep underground. And there might be some technology still left just because they had fusion reactors or these really powerful nuclear batteries that might still be trickling out power. And even if it's one piece of technology out of 100 billion, Starfleet sensors are going to pick that up anyway.
Yep.
And you're going to find it. It's just going to be very rare.
So how has it been writing that story and putting it out in the wild and having other people now play through it? We're several months since that's been released, and it's been, the surveys have come back and stuff. Our solution wasn't anything, it was a solution. It got us out of a jam. Have you heard any really out of the box, wacky, what's one of your favorite solutions that you've heard back from people who've played through this game?
I haven't really encountered any reports of people going really wacky on it. I've heard of one group bringing up their shields to full power, still being trapped, and then trying to launch photon torpedoes. And I think I specifically even mentioned in there that, hey, launching photon torpedoes, that's kind of a bad idea. But at least they had their shields up when the photon torpedoes got pushed back into them.
We ended up going for the safer option, but one of the ideas they almost went with was launching all the shuttlecrafts, because we're on a Galaxy-class ship, so we've got like 20 plus, like 40 crafts or something in the shuttle bay, launching them all out daisy-chained with all the battery packs, and trying to create enough mass to trick the targeting sensors on that, just to all you need is a fraction of a moment. I was like, these things are tiny. These beams are designed to grab moons. You'd need something larger than a Galaxy-class ship. But of course, there was always the saucer separation you could have tried to look into, and a few other ways. But that might have meant leaving part of your ship behind.
Yeah,
flying off with just the star drive. So
I figured that most people would try like a deflector dish, type thing. I specifically mentioned constructive and deconstructive interference of waveforms, since these
we're all
pieces of technology.
radio people too, so we're like, okay, cool, noise canceling, and we can get our heads around that. So coming on to writing for Star Trek, you've got another adventure we're going to be playing after Signals. Anything to tease and scare my science officer with?
It's another sciencey type mission. That's kind of what I like to write. I don't like to write combat missions per se. I like to write things that will make you think about what's going on. So there will be a couple different kinds of science in the next mission. Let's just say a social science, and then some high-tech stuff.
Yeah, I really liked playing through a campaign where we've done a number now where we're meeting other characters and interacting with other species, and then we come to this planet and it was just the ship. It was almost a bottle episode in that way, because there's no guest stars. There's just this ancient place and a puzzle and then a trap and then we leave. and there's there's a lesson to be learned, but there was no adversary. There was no one to help or assist. It was just us. And Signals is going to be quite different. They don't know the story, but I do. In the same way that the repulsor beams versus the starship were very adversarial for the GM, this game that we're about to play, I know is I'm in a way playing my own game off to the side, trying to outrun the players at the table, which is going to be kind of fun. I hope I can split my brain up into those 3 or 4 different places they need to be to pull it all off.
That's awesome. I think that there's going to be a couple more of my missions that I've written that are standalones that can be put into Adventures in the Shackleton Expanse, but also can just be fit anywhere in anyone's adventures. There should be at least a couple. Yeah, I've written a lot.
Have you? Has any of your adventures are you part of the These Are the Voyages rule sets that are standalone adventures that were released?
I have. Let's see here. I need to look at that. I don't think I wrote any of those.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I did not. Yeah. There are some standalone things that have not been released yet, though. But
your story here that you sent in a pitch. I know that the Modiphius and Jim mentioned it when we were talking to him last time, Jim Johnson, that they are one of the few publishers out there, if maybe the only one, that allows you to pitch without an agent story ideas. I kind of love that. That's a spirit of Star Trek going all the way back to, I think, even the original series, if not at least the Next Generation, where they did allow unsolicited pitches from anyone for stories.
Yes.
And episodes like Measure of a Man are one of the great examples of one of those sort of pitches. And I think a few, I don't remember if it was one of the showrunners, if it was Ron D. Moore maybe, who got his start in a similar way, pitching an idea into Star Trek. That might be apocryphal. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was... I loved having the opportunity to even have the chance to throw something out there into the wild of something that I wrote for Star Trek. I'm just glad that Modiphius saw it and said, okay, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about in some ways. Let's get him to write. And I didn't actually start with writing these adventures. I wrote a chunk of the core book. and some of the more crunchy stuff in the core book. Let's see here. I wrote most of the starships. So if you have all the starships actually.
I just read through that one night, just flipping through the histories.
And they asked me to make these little short stories for the starships as well. And I said, okay, no problem. I can try that. I haven't written a lot of short fiction like that, but we'll try it. And I guess they like that too. So I'm pretty proud of some of those.
Did you write the part where the Galaxy class ship that we chose for the USS Horizon? The chapter in the book calls the Galaxy the Beacon of Hope. And was that you?
Yep.
Yeah, that they came in and the Bringers of Hope.
The Bringers of Hope. Yeah, that
just
the outline of a Galaxy class ship is just this iconic.
Yeah, absolutely. That was me.
I was like, I loved I loved those because it as much as I like going through Memory Alpha, I have to hand it to you and everyone who worked on the core book. It's not just academic information on Star Trek. It captures so much of the spirit of this is the Prime Directive, the history of the Federation. Here's the ships, the species, the equipment, every single thing. Even when it's not in character, it's still full of so much flavor and context that I could go to Memory Alpha and read about Galaxy class ships, but I'm just going to get the Wikipedia entry on that. Whereas when I read about the Galaxy class ships in the core book, I'm learning not just what they are, but what they mean.
Yeah. And that part of the pitch that when you said, "Hey, do you want to join in on this?" The way that Justin, the way you were reading out these little pieces, these little teasers, showing it a perspective not from a historian standing back. It's one of the species, one of the people who have been on board, or one of the, interacting with each other.
Yeah, a colonist who was rescued by this ship.
And that was such a great point of view, a perspective. So kudos.
Yeah, no, thanks. I really think that Star Trek grows very well when it actually has viewpoints outside of that which would be our viewpoint, a human viewpoint, or let's say Vulcan viewpoint. You can add stuff into it, obviously, from all of those, but when you see something from outside the Federation going, okay, well, this is what they say they are, and this is what they show that they are through their actions and deeds.
There's like three
that makes it more powerful.
Yeah, there's like 3 different perspectives on the Prime Directive right after you read about the Prime Directive, and even one of them is from a Starfleet captain going, I understand why we've got it, but some days it sucks.
Yeah.
And then other groups like the Ferengi mocking, like they just want to talk. You just keep them talking, you can steal everything from under them. And for someone who's not a fan of Star Trek or doesn't have a strong history in it, I still think they could pick up the core book, read through it, and get the feel that they could run it for their Trekkie friends. And I think it's a really authentic experience. Aaron, you also mentioned Mike Dodd. He's another contributor on the show, one of the founders on Terrible Warriors, and a GM for a spin-off show we're doing called The Cambridge Chronicles. He's getting ready to run through a BattleTech game of his own. So when he found out that I was talking to you and looked up your name and went, oh, he's written for BattleTech. Mike did have a couple questions. If you want, I could just rapid fire them off of you.
Sure.
I don't know BattleTech at all, so your answers aren't going to mean anything to me. But listeners want to know, what era of BattleTech do you like writing for the most?
Ooh. Well, boy, that's tough. I like Starleague era. I like the Starleague era, which is the 28th century.
Now, this means nothing to me. Inner Sphere or Clan?
Inner Sphere.
All right, I'll take it. What's your favorite mech design and tonnage class?
Oh, wow. Okay. My favorite mech design, because it's awful. It is awful, and it's just such a joy because it's so awful, is the Shadowhawk. I absolutely love that mech. It's medium. It's a medium mech. It's 55 tons. See, I can go into all this. And it means nothing to you. But my favorite weight class would probably be actually a light mech.
This is just revenge for all the Star Trek techno nonsense I have abused towards my other players. And I don't understand what these things are.
I can do the technobabble too. Hey, I wrote those starships. You can tell.
Yeah. What? Now, this is actually really interesting. You're both a writer and character in BattleTech.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. You have a canonical character named Gravedigger.
Yes, that's my call sign that I used in BattleTech forever. So if I was in a competition or a tournament, my pilot's call sign was Gravedigger. So since I've been a part of the BattleTech community for so long, they ended up writing me in as a notable pilot for a mech called the Gravedigger. It was a grasshopper mech, and it was specially designed. Yeah.
Nice. Really, really neat. The Gravedigger in Terrible Warrior mythology is also the name of our war bus from After the Bomb. So we created this giant truck that we just plowed through everything, and then ended up equipping it to go into space. So it also,
okay.
And then I think they blew up the moon. So
it's a party bus.
It's the party bus. It's Fortnite. It's the battle bus from Fortnite. So the last question Mike wanted to ask, what are your thoughts? There's a new box set coming out for BattleTech later this year. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Great that it's coming out. It's been a long time since there's been a box set for BattleTech, so.
Great, cool. All right. Last bits here. The Living campaign. I understand there's work going off even into a second season.
Yes.
They've revamped the website, which looks gorgeous now. It's so much easier to get on and get the adventures rather than the mailing list it used to be. And now I've got the pre-order for the command book and the beta quadrant book, and looking forward to sinking my teeth into those as well. Tell us about, is there what come on, spill the beans. Is there any meaty stuff about the Living campaign? What is going on with all these hidden little secrets in each campaign? Why are all the DNA on both of those worlds the same? And what was going on with that portal in the convoy world? And Aaron, what's happening?
I'm not gonna spoil anything, but with what you've played so far, theoretically, if you just finished Tug of War, there is enough clues there for a person to put together an idea of what has happened, what is going on now, and what is led up to that. I don't want to say you'll have all the clues yet, but it's pretty clear something strange is going on to the Shackleton Expanse. Mm-hmm. And it's going to open up a lot more.
We haven't been playing the 23rd century side of the Living campaign. If we were playing those, would we have an even greater context of what might be happening?
It might have. You might have the ability to actually have more clues, but I don't know if
Admiral reports, and they're really interesting, covering like mega structures across the galaxy and all these kinds of things. So
I have at least a couple adventures that have mega structures of some sort. I like strange ideas, clearly. But yeah, no, if you've been doing the 23rd century missions, you might have a couple extra clues. I don't know if you would be all the way better off knowing what's going on yet, but it would just be a slightly different perspective on the same kind of ideas. Mm-hmm. If you even go through the core book, it has nothing to do with the actual missions, but there's artwork in there that suggests what's going on in the Shackleton Expanse.
Yeah, I believe some of the splash pages have been used now in the quick start rules for the Signals campaign we're about to play.
Yes.
So
yes.
So yeah, I've got some of the printouts here for my players around. I think Signals is going to be one of those opening of at least a crack into checking out Pandora's box just a little bit. Yeah. Just open it up, just see what's inside.
And there should be some more information in We Are the Stars of what's going on. I don't know if any of your characters will actually get another one of them. There's a couple clues in this, but there's one that's special.
Well, they're not going to learn anything because they're all going to die in the next 3 hours.
Probably. I want to say that it depends on what your species is. Let's put it that way.
Well, Aaron, you hold your cards close to your chest. Thank you for joining us here for this chat and for giving us like an extended debrief on the Tug of War game. Thank you for writing that game. Can't wait to play your next one. Where can we find you?
I'm on Facebook. I'm Aaron Pollyea on Facebook. I'm the only one. It's not a very common last name, so I'm easy to find.
Yeah, thank you for commenting on our posts. And I was like, oh, there can only be one of these. So
yeah, no, not a problem. I'm really happy to see people enjoying what I wrote, that really does give me joy. That okay, I'm actually entertaining somebody. That made me feel great. So I had to comment, and thank you for playing.
Thank you. No, it was a pleasure. It was tense. Hate, love you, and keep up the good work.
Well, our captain and our comms officer have just arrived, so we're ready to sit down and play Signals. Aaron, thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us here for this short little half hour. Aaron Pollyea writes for Star Trek Adventures, wrote the Tug of War adventure, is not the author of the Signals game that we're about to get into, but is the author of the one immediately after that, so we'll be coming back into your world shortly. And as all things, tune in for the next episode, the first episode of Signals. The crew of the U.S.S. Horizon return. If you're a Patreon supporter, you can head over to the Patreon page right now. We have a pre-brief that we have recorded where I have terrified everyone at the table and given them their new marching orders. And that's it. I have been your host. That's weird. I'm normally on the Game Master, Justin Eacock, joined by my side with
Velvet Duke from the Dandies.
And of course,
Aaron Pollyea. From Michigan, actually. I'm not that far from Toronto.
Not that far, actually. I've driven through Michigan a few times, actually. Whenever I cross the border and start driving really fast to MagFest. So have a great day, Aaron, and thanks again for joining us.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna swap everything around, get ready for this game.